Um, so thank you. I'm coming to you on behalf of the Comprehensive Plan Work Group and as well as the Sustainable Land Strategy Steering Committee. We are going to give you a brief presentation today on the recommendations that have been developed by the Comp Plan Work Group and some history of other work that we've been doing related to the county's update to their comprehensive plan. So I'll be going through some history and recommendations and then asking for some your thoughts and questions towards the end of the presentation. We do have David Killingstad here from PDS, and so I'm going to start off with a little bit of background. David, can you just give a thumbnail sketch of the update process and where we are right now? I'll let you start that off.
Sure. So maybe I gotta take the first bullet there that's on your background slide here. So yes, so we are in the midst of our mandated update to the county's GMA comprehensive plan. Our time horizon that we are looking out to is the year 2044, so the next 20 years. Our primary objective is to account for the next 20 years of population and employment growth, as well as we also have sort of a secondary mandate to look back since our last update in 2015 and determine if there have been any changes to the Growth Management Act that we need to account for in the plan or in our development regulations. That's referred to as the compliance review. We did receive an extension of time by the Washington State Legislature in this last session. House Bill 1241 did move our deadline to complete this update from June of 2024 to December 31st of 2024. We are actually not anticipating using the entire time allotted. We did brief the County Council at the beginning of this month, and I'll be briefing the Planning Commission next Tuesday on an updated schedule that has adoption in September of 2024 to account for the last quarter of the year, which is typically consumed by the council in the budget process, and along with the holidays, really isn't an optimal time to be doing adoption of comp plan updates. So we do have a shift in the schedule that has shifted a few tasks out, including when we will be going to Planning Commission. We will have, we're getting updated schedule information on the project website, and some information will be going out in a future project newsletter as well. So we've got a little shift in the deadline. Much of our focus right now on the project has been spent on some technical work related to the environmental impact statement preparation and transportation modeling that we will be doing of 3 SEPA land use alternatives. And then separately, there are individual groups of county employees who have started the process to triage and identify changes to policies. The primary impetus for a lot of these changes is the countywide planning policies that were updated last year, and so that's having a trickle-down effect into the comp plan of changes that we need to make. But there are other changes that have been identified internally, housekeeping, date change, things like that. And we are also moving forward with the addition of 3 new elements to the county's comprehensive plan, including a climate change element, a tribal coordination element, and an element built around the work that we're doing to plan for a future with light rail in a part of unincorporated Snohomish County between Everett and Linwood, Mill Creek, and Mukilteo. So that's the quick couple-minute thumbnail of where the project's at, and I could talk a little bit more as far as once we get further into this presentation, I can kind of talk about what we'll do with these recommendations and expectations and stuff like that.
That's perfect, David. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions just for David before I jump into our side of it? Just process questions or anything? Okay, excellent. Well, just looking back at a little bit of history here, this The steering committee became aware of this update and identified the SLS opportunity here to provide some important perspective and information about from what SLS has been concerned about, and to weigh in on the changes that are part of this overall process. So they established a work group, and that work group has been meeting now for over 2 years, developing ideas and providing input into the process. SLS's input is important and considered and respected by folks, and that is evidenced from my standpoint in the responses to the comments that we've provided already. We're now at the final recommendation step of our process. As David pointed out, there will be a public review of changes recommended from TDS in the future, and we will have an opportunity to provide some feedback on those as well. But as far as the generative part of the process, we're kind of coming to the end of that, and the comp plan work group being a short-term effort will probably dissolve at least in the near term. And so today I'm going to present some thoughts to you, and I'll be seeking your input on that, and I'll talk about the final steps in our process as we get to the end. So as far as input from SLS to date, we've had our fingerprint on a number of steps in the process. David mentioned the countywide planning policies. We provided some broad themes into that process, which we saw reflected in some of the decisions that came out of that effort. And then later there was the SEPA scoping process, and we were able to provide some input there as well. And then most recently, this county is trying to develop a long-term vision for the county itself and where it's going, and we were able to provide some input into that process. So this is why we've been over 2 years working on this process as a work group. Lots of big things happening, and David has certainly had his hands full with all the different efforts that are underway, doing a great job too. So in terms of advocacy, this is sort of the basic focus that we've been taking in all of our input there, looking for changes to land use policies that reduce flood risk, accommodate changing conditions, and enhance and protect habitat and agricultural resource lands for fish and farms. So we pretty much stuck with this overall broad theme in all of our commenting and idea generation for the last couple of years. Now, in this final stage of our input, we developed 7 specific themes. We actually somewhat came up with ideas and then backed into the themes so that we could more readily articulate what we were trying to get across in a broad sense. So you'll see in the attachments to the invitation, there was a summary document that has these 7 themes in it, and then a summary statement of each of the recommended changes. And then there's the Excel spreadsheet that has the details where we've gone into specific sections and shown how we would recommend what recommended changes we would have there. But in terms of these themes, you can see a big one on conservation of resource lands, one to really support the policies that direct growth into urban areas, supporting the regional growth targets, which are designed to keep allocations of growth into the urban areas and hopefully limit what it ends up in rural areas. And then some ideas on how to improve vitality for farming and the agricultural economy, reducing climate change impacts and flood hazard risks by supporting the kinds of natural processes and limiting adverse impacts from land use decisions. Then in a number of cases in the current policies, it focuses, or the focus is on studying issues. We felt that in a number of specific cases, enough study was done and those policies needed to be implemented. And then finally, we had some ideas on how to address social justice. So those were our 7 overarching themes for our input into the general planning policies, which is the contents of the comprehensive plan. So now I'm going to just run through the sort of broad description of the recommendations that the work group prepared, and we'll do them by chapters. So the ones that we recommended for the land use chapter included a recommendation that we keep within the rural growth allocation limits. And I should point out that now from the countywide planning policies, the regional allocation for rural lands was substantially reduced from, what was it, David, 7 or 8% in the previous plan to 4.5%. Is that correct?
Actually, it was between 9 and 10% is actually historically what we have seen for rural growth is in the range of 9 to 10% over the last decade.
Okay, great, thanks. So hopefully this target will be maintained so that the rural character of the county can be kept over time. We also looked at the relationship between open space and natural floodplains to try and make sure that floodplains and open space designations are looked at as opportunities. We recommended additional support and expansion of the use of TDRs, and we have a whole series of recommendations for transfer of development rights in there. We also recommended a revisit to the purchase of development right program, which has really shown great opportunities for preservation of rural lands, particularly in places like Skagit County. And then finally, under the land use chapter, we propose, we don't put any number there, but we propose that a land conservation goal be included in the plan. And this may come from work on the land conservation initiative that the executive has promoted in the county. Now, if we look at the natural environment recommendations, we had a few more in this particular chapter. Starting with, there's an overarching policy that calls for balancing, which seemed to be more weighted towards property rights and income, and we recommended that that be more evenly balanced to weigh public safety, environmental protection, and the rights of adjacent or nearby property owners. We also recommended that there be an increase in risk reduction requirements in terms of permitting for natural hazards, floodplain management plans be established and consulted, and as well as drainage basin plans. We suggested adding new requirements to tie in with the National Flood Insurance Program and incorporating best available science and the concept of integrated floodplain management. We suggested that there be a limit to development in channel migration zones, and as mentioned before, linking open space with frequently flooded areas. We also suggested implementation of programs like community floodplain solutions, strengthening and increasing the coordination of enforcement actions with other agencies, pursuing funding and technical assistance to implement innovative strategies that help ag folks get through the regulatory hurdles, and then requiring the use of any recommendations that come from watershed management plans or salmon recovery plans as a basis for prioritization of restoration and enhancement projects, at least whenever feasible. So those are the natural environment recommendations. And the last one is really one of our primary social justice recommendations. And this is, we acknowledge that there's a lot of the really affordable housing or there's some affordable housing anyway, still in flood risk areas, and that there needs to be some way to address low-income housing so that we can reduce future flood risk for those areas. So the next steps, whatever input and comments I received through this week, this meeting basically, will go in along with comments that I've received from the Ag Board and from the Farm Bureau and other review from the steering committee, and hope to put a final touches on the recommendations and get it to the steering committee by the end of the month. And then hopefully in the first week of May, we'll be able to submit to PDS at that point. And then, as mentioned, we will of course review later on when the public document comes out. So that's my overview. I'm interested in just getting your thoughts on the changes that we've suggested, and if there's anything you don't understand in those. Do you have any additional ideas that you'd like to share? And just get a sense, maybe this was more for the public, but willingness to support and advocate for these kind of changes that SLS is putting forward. So I will open it up to questions or thoughts anybody would like to share, and be happy to answer those. Hi, Heather, go ahead.
I just had a couple clarifying questions, if that's okay.
Sure.
One is, when you mentioned the salmon recovery and the watershed plans, I also assume this will include water cleanup plans as well and TMDLs.
You know, that's a great suggestion. I should have picked up on that, being an old ecology guy, but I will add that to the list. Thank you.
And then one other question, and I don't know how sensitive this question might be, but I was wondering if land acquisition is a piece somewhere, whether it's under TDR or PDR or somewhere else. And I don't know how sensitive of a question that might be, so feel free to facilitate on that one.
Yeah, so what, who would be the acquirer, I guess? The TDRs and PDRs address the long-term development rights while leaving the owner still owning the property.
Yeah, I'm not sure if, I know there's been strategy through tribes, and I didn't know if that was part of the tribal coordination piece of it, and there may be others that I'm not even thinking of, but that's the first thought that comes to mind,
I think overall, we are looking at different ways to preserve the rural character of the county and to maintain both of that balance, between the land uses as well as the restoration opportunities. I don't know if we have a specific recommendation that goes beyond that right now.
Yeah, and I think, Heather, that dovetails nicely with the land conservation initiative that David was referring to earlier. That's an executive priority that there's a lot within that umbrella, but it's essentially sort of looking at lots of different tools to expand public ownership or ownership of lands in the public interest. One of the tools, or a couple of the tools that they're focused on right now, is TDR and PDR. as a way to accomplish that. But there's lots of other mechanisms, but I think that's what David's referring to as the broader goal, that having land conservation goals.
And of course, some of that, Jessica, would end up being considered under the community floodplain solutions as well. Yeah, thumbs up, she says. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. Any other questions or thoughts that I can answer or David can answer?
This makes sense to me, especially given the fact that there's still some more review to happen. How closely aligned are the Farm Bureau with wider SLS goals?
Well, I talked to them last Wednesday or Thursday night. I think it was Wednesday night. And so far, there were things that were not included in this that were of interest to them. And I wasn't exactly sure how they fit. There were comments about improving warning systems for tsunamis. And that a lot of farmers feel threatened by that are in the lowland areas, evidently. So that was one, as well as just improving warning systems for flooding. So both of them. And so I don't know, David, is that the kind of stuff that belongs in policy, or is that more procedural stuff or operational stuff?
Well, I mean, I think, part of what the comp plan is part of its intended function is to sort of set up the policy direction regarding the regulatory side of things, as well as programs and capital improvements.
Oh, okay.
So, and part of what we're, one of the things that I mentioned at the top is we're actually, as part of this update, doing a reformat of the county's comprehensive plan. As you've been noting, the focus of what SLS is intending to sort of insert into the conversation is suggestions and comments around the general policy plan. The general policy plan is one of 4 documents that actually make up our county comprehensive plan, the other 3 being the transportation element, the cap facilities plan, and the park and recreation element. And we're actually, that's a legacy that goes back to the original adoption in '95, that construct. And we haven't done really anything to the plan itself in that time frame. So we're actually going to be moving away from referring to the general policy plan and chapters, and actually call them elements. So it's not something necessarily that affects how you portrayed it. These recommendations, that's fine. But part of what we're trying to do is to reestablish the link between the comprehensive plan and development regulations and programs and capital investments, so that essentially, if you want to know why we're doing something, what's the policy direction for some county action, you go into the comprehensive plan and you can find that. So, we've got a lot of policies. We have about 939 policies that exist today in the comprehensive plan, many of which provide key direction for a range of county functions. So, the degree to which that there is or isn't policy direction on a subject, that's part of what we're looking at in this update to ensure that there is. I was just looking up on the aforementioned, I wanted to respond to the aforementioned comment about the subject of land acquisition. And I would just note that in the land use chapter, under the open space, shoreline and scenic resources goal, which is goal 10, there is language in here that says, under policy 10B2, the county shall consider various land acquisition techniques in the development of cooperative management plans and implementation strategies for open space areas of interjurisdictional significance. That was just one that I happened to just kind of dial in rather quickly. So, there already is some language in here that talks about, that links land acquisition to open space. There is certainly language that talks about PDR and TDR with respect to ag land. So no, I don't think it's an off the table kind of topic to bring up.
Great. Thanks for that clarification, David. That's wonderful. Other thoughts that I can add here? Actually, there were, CK, there were two other points that were made at the meeting. One was that the models for flooding are not accurate when it comes to high water and living quarters. And I'm not sure what the recommendation would be there, but something that needs to perhaps tie back to the accuracy of the models, and I think it had to do somewhat with the sales of property and being able to say, well, you're above a certain flood level or something like that. Daryl?
Yeah, thank you. And sorry, I haven't really had time to go through all the materials and send comments to you earlier, but
Okay.
one thing I was thinking about is the possibility of kind of following King County's example with creating agricultural production districts where they bought out the property rights or development rights for the ag lands to try to keep those properties in ag lands within the district. Another comment I had is, the county plan still stresses the no net loss idea, which has never worked between variances and insufficient protections. We're still losing habitat faster than we can recreate it with all our habitat projects. And there's some sections where the county's very strong on trying to protect property rights for the landowners, but it doesn't take into account the property rights by the state and the tribes for fish and wildlife. And there needs to be a better balance there, which again, in local governments, we just haven't done a very good job of anywhere in this state. So we need to do a better balance for natural resources. So thank you.
Yeah, I'd love some specifics. If you could point to certain parts of the certain elements, as they're called now, Daryl, that would be really helpful. So, yeah, CK.
I think, well, I don't know if it's in the comments already that's in there, but one of the major issues I see coming up is the diking districts not being able to keep up with all they're required to do, and just the idea of small storage. And so, kind of echoing what Daryl just said about an example from King County, the Snoqualmie Valley Watershed Improvement District, that kind of an entity helping the diking districts organize something like that, and especially as irrigation and water allocation becomes more of an issue, that organization set up to do that, right? And I see the need for that, especially in the still Snoqualmie with less snowpack, but probably in the Sky and lower Snoqualmie too. And so I think you could interpret some of the stuff we have as supporting something like that, but it's not explicitly called out. And this might be too late to exactly add something like that, but
No, we're good. We can,
Yeah.
we've still got time, CK. And main thing is we just need to figure out specifically where we want to recommend it in the policies that are there today. So if you have an idea about that, that would be great. Otherwise, I'll feed it through and get our policy guys to look at it.
yeah, I don't. I guess I'm just seeing a potential need, and I don't know exactly where it would fit in. So
Yeah.
One quick thought, David, is to take a look at the climate change recommendation we had, and because I think it speaks to a lot of those elements, right? Changes in conditions that are going to impact ag properties and other areas.
Yep.
Yeah,
And then
and,
maybe weave it in there. Mhm.
and our organization has a little more of a regional approach, and Western Washington just isn't set up for the water. We haven't had to trade the water and worry about that. It's all about getting it off the land, the water off the land for farmers. And you look down in southern, the southern Willamette Valley, and they're starting to dial it in, but they weren't set up for the changes that are happening. And so it would be smart to get ahead of it.
Well, and Skagit County already has some really good models for holding water back at certain times of the year for sub-irrigation and that type of thing. So maybe there's ways we can weave some ideas in from that, as well as they have probably the best PDR program in the state right now, preserving 2,000 acres of farmland a year. So
yeah, and just having those innovative things built into, because a lot of those aren't in the code. I've been trying to implement those, and our PDS department's been really accommodating, but I feel like that has more to do with the individual staff than the strength of the statutes. So
yeah, that's great. Thanks, CK. We'll take those forward. Any other ideas, questions, thoughts? There was someone as a chat here I didn't see. Oh, Jessica, very good. Well, if there aren't, then the next steps here are to incorporate what we've heard. I did tell both the Ag Board and the Farm Bureau that I needed any specific ideas by the end of the week. That'll give us a week or so to review and kind of get things together, and then over to the steering committee one more time. And hopefully, David Killingstad, we can get something to you in the first week or so of May, if that works for you. The first 2 weeks would be better, but the first week is what we're going to shoot for.
Yeah, that time frame, there's no issues with that time frame. As I indicated at the top, we're just at various stages of sort of starting to work our way through potential policy amendments. It's really varying based on the topic area. Keep in mind that the staff that's working on this also have projects that are not related to the update. So hence the reason that we're sort of in a mode of some things have gotten out of the gate a little bit quicker. Others are still kind of in their beginning steps as far as kind of scoping out the work.
And I did compliment Terry Swanberg from David's staff, has been working with us right along for the last month and a half or so as we put these final recommendations together. And she's been a real good source of grounding and ideas, and just making sure that what we're putting forward still makes sense in the bigger context of things. So we've really appreciated that help. The comp plan work group primarily has been lately made up of myself and Todd Eastman from my staff, Beth from Jessica's team, and Terry Swanberg and Nick Bratton. There are others that have been participating in various meetings, but those are the folks that have been doing the heavy lifting for everybody. So good bunch. I think they will be glad to get a bow on this and move it forward so we can think about other things. But thank you all for participating. If you think of anything before the end of the week and you want to add in, please feel free. Even next week, if you have ideas, I can probably accommodate that. But thank you, everybody. Appreciate you attending and listening.
Hey, David.
Today.
David, let me just kind of wrap up for a couple. I want to just kind of explain, add on to what I had said at the beginning about some next steps, just so everybody's kind of clear of what will happen once we get these comments. So as these recommendations cut across the number of topic areas, land use, housing, and natural environment, they are going to be triaged out. We've got different folks leading up those respective topics, And so what will likely happen is this will come in and I'll pass it along to the project managers who are responsible for those sections. Now, behind the scenes, there is coordination. We have a lot of, we have kind of a pairing up of these sections, and there's a fair bit of overlap so that somebody who's working on housing is also plugged into land use and so on and so forth. So there will be coordination to ensure that where there are themes that are being woven across an element or elements of the comp plan, that we're not creating any kinds of inconsistencies. But we will take these in and they will get sort of triaged out to some folks. As you had indicated in your opening remarks, our plan is to begin as early as this summer and continuing into spring of next year, basically putting out in up to 5 batches groups of policy amendments. The plan is to put them on our website for 30 days and allow the public to provide comments on the policies in sort of a drafty draft stage. These will not be considered finalized or polished like we would take them to the Planning Commission, but rather we want to keep some level of fluidness so that the public has some ability to kind of help shape where some of this direction is, policy direction is going. So there'll be more information coming out here once we're kind of working out internally what the schedule looks like as far as when things get dropped, but could be as soon as this summer, as I said, and late as spring of next year. We also may do some additional outreach beyond just putting them on our webpage. We are exploring in-person type activities, given the situation that exists today with the pandemic and the dropping of a lot of the restrictions. So we may have some opportunities to do some things there, as well as some one-on-one. We can even come back to an SLS meeting and have provide a briefing of the changes, and then allow you opportunity for discussion and additional comments. Then that'll all be fed into our Planning Commission process, which kicks off in January of next year, and we'll have a schedule. We've put together a tentative schedule of what topics will be briefed in which months next year at Planning Commission as well. I think natural environment is coming a little later in the spring, early summer of next year. So we got a lot of work ahead of us. Do appreciate the level of interest of SLS here in our work. It's great. It helps us provide some good solid points of contact into a lot of a good chunk of the county from a geographic standpoint, the rural and resource land. So just wanted to kind of mention that as far as where things go. This will not be the last, or you won't, your comments won't just sort of go into an abyss. They will be sort of farmed out, and as I said, you'll see these things come back a little bit later this year.
Excellent. Thank you, David. That's wonderful context, and I really appreciate understanding the timing for the next steps. So very good, everyone. Thanks again, and look forward to getting the final document out to everyone. So very good. All the best.
Thank you.
Yep. Sarah, did you want to